name is Brian Schilder. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London within the Neurogenomics Lab. And today I'm going to be giving you a walkthrough of our software suite, rworkflows, which is a set of tools to be used for continuous integration when developing R packages. In this case, we're going to be using the example of our R package HPOExplorer, which is used for analyzing the human phenotype ontology. Now, we already have a lot of these elements already set up, including the description file, README, R functions, all of the basic elements that you would want. If you would like to start one R package from scratch, you can actually use the template R template, which I'll be demonstrating in another video. But for right now, we're going to use this as an example, and what we'd like to do is to be able to use continuous integration with GitHub Actions. So the first thing we need to do is install rworkflows. rworkflows is available through CRAN. You can also access it via GitHub on its remote repository. And there's instructions for installing the development version here. So this is installed now, and we can take a look at some of the functions. There's quite a few here which are useful for different aspects of our development and continuous integration. But the one that we're going to be focusing on today is use workflow. So let's take a look at some of the documentation for this. This is essentially automating the setup of GitHub Actions for you, and it calls from the centralized GitHub action called rworkflows. This lives on GitHub and calls a series of actions which are useful for building, installing, and testing your R packages. It will also provide code coverage, as well as building you a GitHub Pages website from the documentation automatically. So to get this set up, all we need to do is run this with all the defaults. And you'll see that it says it's saved a YAML file. So let's go over to this folder .github. In the subfolder workflows, you'll find this YAML file called rworkflows, and we can take a look. This is a very short YAML script that calls the rworkflows GitHub action, which again is centrally maintained, so that every time a bug or something needs to be changed with the action itself, that's immediately propagated to all of the users, and on your end you don't actually have to change anything. This workflow file just has some basic information about which virtual machines you want to use on which different computing platforms, whether it's Ubuntu, macOS, Windows, as well as the different parameters with which you want to run the rworkflows GitHub action. And this can be read about in more detail in the help file, but briefly it includes many things about what kind of checks you want to run, whether you want to build a website, what kinds of unit tests you want to run. And you'll also notice these GitHub token and Docker token variables. These correspond to secrets, GitHub secrets that you've stored within your respective GitHub repository. This is the one thing that you will need to set up yourself, but it's actually quite easy. The first thing we'll do here, just to quickly demonstrate, is go to the GitHub repository for our demo R package, and then go into Settings. You'll see down here on the left, there's a drop-down called Secrets and Variables. You go to Actions, and you'll see that we have already set up a couple of organization level secrets. These are secrets available to all users within our neurogenomics GitHub organization. But you can also set up new repository secrets that are specific to this repository. Essentially, these are the main elements. The PAT GitHub, this is a personal authentication token for GitHub, and that allows you to download resources and have permissions to be able to make pushes using the workflow. And then you have some optional ones here, like the organization, that your Docker Hub account is named, and the Docker Hub token, which you can also set up if you're using Docker, which I'll explain in a little bit. But the main one you need is PAT GitHub. That's the only required one. And on the rworkflows README, there's also instructions for how to set that up. Great, so let's take a look here. So we have, this is already available, this is available. So really, you don't really need to even look at the YAML file. This is more just for demo purposes. The idea is that that's all automatically set up, and now that we have made the changes that we want to make, we're going to add these to be staged in Git. And then we're going to write a commit message. And we're going to then push to the remote repository. So let's go back over to our repository, and you'll see there are now not only the subfolder where we have the rworkflows YAML script, but we'll also notice this little gold dot which indicates that the GitHub actions have been launched. We can look at some of the details on this. There is our commit message up at the top indicating which commit that this is being triggered in response to. It's being launched on all 3 VMs from different platforms. And you can see right now within this Ubuntu one, it's initializing a Docker container, which is based off of the Bioconductor Docker container. We can inspect each of these, and this should take about 15 minutes or so to complete running. Depending on the size of your package, this can take shorter or longer, but it's all totally automated, so you can kind of just let it run in the background. And if anything fails, you'll automatically receive an email to the email address that your GitHub account is registered to, and letting you know that it's failed on Windows or Mac or maybe just Ubuntu. And you can actually go through and check the errors. Now, I've actually run GitHub Actions on this many times before, but just for a demo to show you, on this particular push, there were some issues, and when you click on the respective platform on which the issues occurred, it will immediately bring you right to where the error is. And I can see here there was an issue with loading phenotypes to genes, which is a function that essentially gets a resource for the HPO. In this case, the resource had changed its location on the internet, so I then had to go back, fix the location, update the URL, and once I did that, I was able to pass all three of these VMs, and all checks were completed. And as a bonus, there was there's now a badge that I can show that shows that all of the checks are passing, and also this report on code coverage, which is essentially what percentage of your code has actually been tested with unit tests. Now right now we're at 49%, so this is something we would want to improve. And because this is linked to CodeCove, we can actually go through and see exactly which parts of our package need to be tested more thoroughly. And just briefly, how do we even get all of these badges? Well, this builds upon the our package Badger, and we essentially provide a wrapper with some additional extensions in this rworkflows use badges function. You can actually just embed this directly in the header of your README, assuming that it's in R Markdown format, and then you can knit this R Markdown file to generate your Markdown README. And you'll see here that it automatically generates all of these nice tags for you, including the license, what version it is, the size of the code, when the last commit was, the status with the rworkflows GitHub Actions, and the code coverage, which we saw before. So this is just a very brief demo of how our workflows can be used to set up continuous integration via GitHub Actions in a fairly automated and easy way that doesn't require you to dig into the details of how to write YAML scripts for deploying GitHub Actions. You really just need to run the use workflow function. Now, if we want to, we can add some more fancy parameters here. So specifically, I want to make sure that the Docker container that the GitHub action generates actually gets pushed to Docker Hub, which is another repository for storing Docker containers, and so that other people can pull down images of the Docker container and start using your package immediately without having to worry about installing any system or R package dependencies. So we're going to use, again, this use workflow function, and then set run docker equals true, and then look for the other Docker arguments. So Docker org, our Docker Hub organization is Neurogenomics Lab. My username is bshelder, and we'll also want to make sure that we're using this force new argument here, because by default this function will detect that you already have a YAML file named the same thing, and it'll just say, well, it already exists, so we're not going to override it. No need to write a new one. But we're going to use this force new argument to tell it to ignore that old one and generate a new one. So you can see, again, we see the saving workflow to the respective subfolder, and that's been updated. And now we can go and do the same thing. commit, and then push to GitHub. You'll notice that it's possible to actually run many rounds of GitHub Actions. We still have our previous commits run going on here, and then the new one that we just launched when we updated the YAML file. So these can run simultaneously, but if you only want to run one of them, because now this old one is a bit redundant, you can just do cancel run. And this one will continue running. And then once that's done, you'll get some messages about whether it failed, and if it's all good, then you should see that it's continuing to pass. So this is just a quick demo for today, but we'll be adding new videos to give you some sense of what the full capabilities of rworkflows is, and also how to build a R package from scratch using some of the other tools introduced in the rworkflows package and the associated template R package template. Thanks, and talk to you soon.